According to a brochure I once read, Minnesota is a pretty damn good place to fish. It's an angler's paradise, really. The land of 10,000 lakes and gosh knows how many rivers, all chock full of good stuff like muskies, trophy smallmouths, and big walleyes if you're into that sort of thing. I've caught all those species here over the years, but during this visit, none of them are on the docket. I've been lured to Minnesota this time by this dude. He's hellbent on convincing me that all the folks enamored with those glam species are missing out on the challenge, fun, and benefits of targeting the native red horse suckers that they'll step right over on the path to more socially acceptable targets. So, who's the real sucker? Me? For flying all the way out here to pass on potential musky glory in the promised land?
This is a decent amount of work for suckers.
Or are you the sucker for not recognizing an incredible fishing opportunity that's right under many of your bass, trout, walleye, muskie, and pike-obsessed noses? I'm Joe Cermele. This is Fishing on the B-Side. Base Camp is the quaint little town of Stillwater, Minnesota, which sits on the St. Croix River that creates the border between Minnesota and Wisconsin. Beyond that, I can't give you any more specifics on location by order of my sucker contact, Tyler Winter.
I just want to say this is a really great mudroom.
Designed it myself.
It's not because he's worried everyone will flock to his favorite sucker holes with rods and reels. I mean, shit, he already knows nobody does that. But they might show up with bows and arrows. Tyler is a champion of the underdogs. He's an environmental scientist by trade and a well-known player in the rough fish angling community. Matter of fact, you might have caught him in Das Boat Season 2, chasing bigmouth buffalo with Ryan Callahan and Miles Nolte. Ah! Tyler will preach the good word of suckers, bowfin, mooneye, and buffalo to anyone that will listen. To say he's obsessed with these underappreciated species is an understatement. He's set up seminars across the region to help educate folks about the harm to native species wanton waste from bow fishing has created, and to help change their perception of some of these fish, suckers especially, with sucker facts, like this one.
There are 78 species of suckers native to North America. 42 of them have conservation designations, meaning they are in trouble.
Now, I already know how Tyler feels about suckers, so before we dive headlong into his world, let's back up for a little perspective.
Do you guys sell bait or?
Clap your hands and stamp your feet. Here comes another musical beat.
The first stop I made when I touched down in Minnesota was Bob Mitchell's Fly Shop in St. Paul. I've been friends with the crew here for years. In fact, owner Rob Hawkins holds the title for the biggest muskie ever caught on fly. But I didn't need any musky flies this time. I just wanted to see how my old amigos felt about suckers, and hopefully the answer was good enough to at least recommend a few sucker patterns, because I knew Tyler wasn't about that fly life.
What are your thoughts on red horse?
I think they're awesome. They're accidental catches, though. I've never targeted
You've never gone out to just target them?
No.
When I'm smallmouth fishing and I see them like floating around by my ankles, I drift my fly
But
past
there's
them.
no appeal for you to go out and like just do this?
No, not really.
Red horse suckers, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
To catch them?
Anything about them?
And they have red fins.
The sucker enthusiasm around here is infectious, to say the least. But I kind of expected that.
If I was gonna go fish for one, I'd probably take some of these guys.
And even though these guys only catch them accidentally, they know they'll accidentally eat nymphs, turd flies, worms, and occasionally crayfish patterns.
I don't really know how big these suckers, like 3 and 4X, if that doesn't work. If I'm under gun for a sucker with 3X, tip it.
Now, I don't plan to fly fish exclusively. I'm here to learn Tyler's methods, but I wanted to have the option. Because if I'm going all in on suckers, I'm going in with all my guns blazing. Tyler's program revolves around worms. Lots of worms. Like, dude's got enough worms on hand for a sucker session to open his own worm farm. But the game, at least in a smaller, faster river like we're fishing, isn't a simple matter of bait and weight. A lot of thought goes into the presentation, which Tyler's spent quite a few years refining.
I'll let it sit on the bottom for a minute and then lift it and let it move.
Got it.
And then
Just step it down the pool.
yeah.
Most of the time, your eyes lead you to the fish. You'll see them piled in a soft eddy or flashing in the riffles, and according to Tyler, it's the fish in the fast water that are out hunting for food. The ones you see stacked up in slow water are just resting or digesting. But this water is higher, faster, and more stained up due to recent rains than Tyler was hoping.
This water's a little higher than you want. Touch, just a wee touch. But we're gonna work it out. The fish are here.
We're in that dreaded angler's purgatory where, yeah, it's fishable, but success isn't going to come as easy as it should. To keep his baits firmly rooted in the quicker flows, Tyler uses fairly heavy slinky weights, which we'll talk more about later. You might think such hefty terminal tackle would dampen your ability to feel these fish in strong current, but despite the raging flows, when I finally got picked up, man, I felt it. Matter of fact, if I didn't know for certain that monster brown trout didn't live in this river, that's what I would have sworn I had, just based on the ferocity of the fight. And here's something you should know.
All suckers are native fish. People always ask me if they are carp or invasive. No, and no.
Meet the river red horse. It's the larger of the two species we're targeting and the first sucker I've ever caught worthy of a picture for the fridge. This one measured just a hair over 20 inches, but Tyler has caught river reds pushing 30 inches. The thing is, in some bodies of water, including the one we're on now, river reds are protected. If you're a bow fisherman, that can be problematic because the smaller, more common shorthead red horse that aren't protected look pretty damn similar to the river reds. The only real difference is that the shortheads don't have those big extended rubbery lips. And it would be incredibly easy to confuse a shorthead with a juvenile river.
They're like the base of the food chain. You know, everything wants to eat these things.
Tyler holds special permits from Fish and Wildlife that allow us to catch and release river reds here. And he knows all the juicy holes where the big uns hang out. All this hole gave us for the rest of the evening was a moon-eye, another favorite of Tyler's, but he said the next morning we'd be headed to one of his favorite and typically more productive river red horse locales. What he failed to mention was that just getting to the water was going to require sidestepping a near vertical canyon wall and hiking pretty far upriver to the good stuff.
Tom.
That's all fine and good, but with the high flows and, added stress of waiting with a couple grand worth of camera gear, it was taking the group 15 minutes to go 50 yards amid constant zigzagging and backtracking after realizing, you know what, maybe this isn't the perfect place to cross. In short order, we scrapped the plan to reach a distant bend Tyler really liked and decided to just fish right where we were. And wouldn't you know it, there were suckers right where we were.
Not a big one.
They might not have been the big river reds we wanted, but Tyler got the shortheads dialed in pretty quick.
Just fished that hole for 15 minutes and got one little smallmouth. Dude steps in. He's got the touch.
I, ironically, was struggling to catch any suckers because of those pesky, unwanted smallmouths swimming around.
This is bycatch. And there's some decent little smallmouths here.
But I do smell a teaching moment here.
Suckers are an indicator of clean water and good habitat. If you like catching big smallmouth, thank a sucker.
Now, the only thing bothering me was the heat from those fresh hot flies burning a hole in my book bag. Just like when fly fishing for carp, it's really beneficial to be able to physically see a sucker suck up your fly, and in this ripping water, that wasn't going to happen. But later in the day, after a little wiggle to another stretch, the opportunity presented itself in a calm, clear back channel.
A little bit different scenario here, slower water. Now I'm actually seeing smaller goldens. Tyler says these are working out here. It's like bone fishing. We're gonna go nymphy. We're gonna just hop this in front of some faces and see what happens.
What happened was I couldn't get any of those little bastards to commit to anything I dropped in front of them. In fact, they actually moved away from my flies instead of coming to check them out. But this does help dispel the myth, the same myth surrounding carp, that suckers are vacuum cleaners that slurp up anything. These fish are wary, smart, and particular. And while they're not eating my flies, let's learn about something they do like to eat that you should be very happy about.
Many species of suckers are known to eat invasive zebra mussels, doing us a favor.
If we were going to pull any more river red horse out of this swollen creek, it was going to be on worms. Luckily, the afternoon sunshine lit up the water a bit and helped us get better visuals on some bigger river reds flashing around. And while they weren't exactly pouncing on our nightcrawlers like flies on a rib roast, we closed out the day with a nice little flurry.
Doubled up!
Look at that.
Just by pure luck of the draw, another nice river red found my crawler, and Tyler got himself another shorthead. Both of these catches were made possible by our enhanced ability to visually see which lanes these fish were feeding in, and the ability of Tyler's slinky weights to keep our worms in those lanes. A few split shots never would have cut it. And whether you're after suckers, catfish, trout, or anything else that eats over rocky bottom and heavy current, you should know how these specialized weights work and how you make them, which just happens to be the topic of our self-help segment, Talkin' Shit. Despite what this may look like, the shit that we're going to talk about is not cooking heroin in Tyler's living room. We're making slinky weights, which are a series of lead balls stacked together and encased in paracord. Slinky weights are arguably most popular with the salmon and steelhead guys that bounce egg sacs down swift, rocky runs, and they're so popular because they can bend and flex. Unlike a rigid lead weight that has a tendency to wedge itself hard into the rocks, a slinky weight will sort of softly conform to the bottom contours. They'll sort of gently curl and snake around the rocks, and they'll hang on tight because of the extra grip provided by their paracord casing. But because these weights can shapeshift, it's very difficult to get one hopelessly hung up in the rocks. And we'll say that about 95% of the time, a quick pop of the rod tip will free them right up. Now, you can stuff your slinky weights with split shot, but Tyler comes correct and old school and leans on buckshot, and he's very particular about his weights and measures.
I'm using double-aught buckshot to make these, and that means it takes 8 to make an ounce.
For efficiency's sake, Tyler stuffs his paracord with enough shot to create 2 slinky weights at the same time. That way, when he melts the paracord between the 2 shot strings, he's automatically sealing one end of 2 slinky weights. Before the melted paracord cools completely, he'll crimp each end with a pair of pliers to make sure they're sealed up tightly and to create flat tabs on each end of the slinky weights. While all this crimping and stuffing is happening, Tyler has a little metal wire heating up, which he uses to burn a hole through each end of his slinky weights. Those holes allow you to attach them via a snap swivel, which is rigged to slide freely up and down your main line. This is how slinky weights are traditionally rigged, and allowing them to slide freely makes it even more difficult for them to get hung up. So, whether you're sick of losing terminal tackle or just really tired of retying rigs, give slinky weights a shot, because they can save you a lot of headache whether you're trying to walk a bait down a fast rocky run, or just dead sticking with light tackle over rocky bottom, which is what Tyler and I are about to do. With only one day left in town and fed up with fighting big flows on small water, Tyler offered to take me to a much larger river closer to his home.
These are the suckers in your neighborhood.
The trade-off for ditching wading for a couple Y-shaped sticks stuck in the bank was that we weren't going to catch any giant river red horse here because there aren't any right here. In this case, that's simply because we jogged west and have landed just outside the river red horse's range, but in other parts of the country, native suckers have disappeared for myriad reasons, ranging from overharvest to climate change to human meddling with the environment. Matter of fact,
The first fish to go extinct in the United States was a sucker. If you're a sucker nerd like me, you'll want to know it was the hairlip sucker.
Tyler, however, has promised me a pile of shorthead red horse here, and about 30 seconds after my first cast, it appeared he was a man of his word, except it wasn't a sucker that hoovered my worm off the bottom.
Not a sucker, but it's a big smallmouth. I'm disappointed that's not a sucker. What is wrong with me? Tyler's like, he's getting inside my brain, man.
For the first bit of this session, I couldn't keep nice smallmouths off my dead stick nightcrawlers, which subsequently made me question why I worked so hard throwing streamers and Ned rigs and jerkbaits and shit at them instead of, nightcrawlers.
Oh my God, it's another tank. It's another freaking tank small jaw. Circle hook. Just barely in there.
But thank goodness, I eventually weeded out all those obnoxious bronzebacks in that run so the shorthead floodgates could open. After 2.5 days of chasing around a fish, I'll admit I've stepped over my whole life too. Here's what I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to say, hey man, you're missing out on a ripper of a fight here. Suckers are strong, and they pull. And that pull is better than a walleye, about equal to a decent trout, and not nearly as scrappy as those bycatch smallmouths. But Tyler never said he was in it for the battle. Tyler is in it because of a deep appreciation for native species, which I happen to share. And with that appreciation comes the benefit of chasing fish in some gorgeous, secluded places with zero competition. In an era when everyone complains about how crowded their trout streams and bass rivers are, there's a lot to be said for being in love with a fish that doesn't provide a heaping helping of Instagram glory or get a case of lockjaw due to angling pressure. And unlike carp that often require baiting swims with corn and oats and all that fancy jazz, all you need to play the sucker game is a good old-fashioned tub of worms, because
Suckers don't suck, they bite.
But this does leave one question remaining. How do suckers taste? The most common thing to do with suckers is grind them up and make sucker balls, but Tyler already did that in Das Boat, so I told him to pick another dish. He chose fish tacos, which I already did with the snakeheads in the last episode, but listen, let's just forget about the final dish, okay? All I was really interested in was tasting a piece of fried sucker by itself, which I quickly learned isn't easy to procure, considering suckers have more Y bones than a Siamese twin pike.
It doesn't have to be a perfect fillet job because you're going to debone it anyway.
Right.
It's not like you're trying to preserve that perfect triangular fillet.
In fairness to Tyler, he's not exactly filleting hundreds of suckers a season. He's doing this for me. And what we ended up with was enough boneless sucker meat for like a couple fish tacos. So I guess that sort of worked out. And as for the flavor, well,
It's super mott.
Yeah.
I think catfish has a fishier taste than this. No joke.
if you're into fishing primarily for edibles, now you know that sucker pretty much tastes like walleye. Now for me, much like those American shad from episode 1, I'm probably not going all in on sucker fishing just for the table, but no doubt chasing these fish, learning about them from Tyler, And seeing his passion for them has made me realize that when I spot suckers on the trout stream, they're worthy of some targeted drifts. And when I'm tired of jockeying for position on local rivers and lakes, I can always go to the sucker hole with some worms and my kids and let them crank on something that pulls with a lot more zing than bluegills.
Oh, got a bone.